Welcome back to Around the Campfire with AmeriCamp. I'm Jen and I have a wonderful special guest this week. We're speaking with Marcie Schneider, the president of Intrax. Hi Marcie, how are you?
Hi Caitlin, I'm doing great today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from San Francisco. I know there's a bit of a time difference, so thank you for being available today. So I think we just want to start by hearing a bit more about you and your background. You obviously have a great sort of background within the summer camp industry. So are you able to tell us a little bit more about kind of how you got started and a bit about your background with the summer camp industry?
Yes, and my background with the summer camp industry starts very young, about age 5, when, hard to believe, I don't think that would ever happen in these days, but my parents sent me away to a summer camp for 8 weeks when I was barely 6 years old. And we lived in Pennsylvania and I went to camp in New Hampshire, so it was also quite a distance. And so I flew by myself for the first time with a big tag around my neck. So if I got lost, please return me. And off I went. And that started actually within camp 10 years of being a camper. And then a couple of years of being a counselor. First year in the kitchen, which was what everyone did, was serving 3 meals a day to lots of kids, cleaning up. But it was great fun because of being able to hang out with all of the other junior counselors that were there. And we had a lot of laughs and fun. Amazing. And then I was a tennis instructor the second summer. But then outside of the camp industry, but related to how I got to this field of cultural exchange, growing up, we also hosted a lot of exchange students from around the world. And they would stay in our house anywhere from a few weeks to a whole school year. And so I met people before I had ever traveled internationally from everywhere. So it was kind of a natural progression that with all of that having happened, I also studied abroad myself. And that's a long story I won't go into today, but that was what really kicked off my absolute love of travel, people, seeing how cultures can get along better by getting to know each other, having fun. Having friends all around the world. And so that's how I chose my career path, which wasn't really my intended career path. I always intended to be a lawyer, and I still kind of every now and then think, I wonder what kind of lawyer I would have been, but I just fell so passionately in love with all of this that it was just natural for me to go into this field.
I think those sort of unplanned and unexpected career paths often end up being the best and most fun decisions. So I think that that's such an interesting story that obviously you were a camper and then a counsellor. I think that's so wonderful that you have such a close connection with camp, that's obviously such an influential brand that Intrax has at the moment with AmeriCamp. And I think it's great that you're so involved having that kind of backstory with it. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, I do think that camp really, for kids, starting out, I don't mean kids just in their first year, but just for kids in general to be able to have that fortune and luck to be able to go to a camp like that where you meet so many other kids and you learn how to get along. And, we did in our camp, we did a ton of sports. And so the early competitive nature kind of came out, but the camp handled it in a really positive way. And the independence that you learn and the fun that you have and the creativity and just everything. There were so many life skills that, had no idea were coming out of that period, but definitely did. And then, being able to continue at the same camp as a counselor, my deepest lifelong friendships are actually from way long time ago, from either camp or camp counseling.
I love that.
And our camp has reunions and we go back and, for quite a while, we were also placing counselors, international counselors in that camp. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful program. One of the best cultural exchange programs there can be.
I think that's such a wonderful thing that you've mentioned, that you're still friends with your camp friends. I think that's kind of what everyone dreams to happen, and you're a clear example of that. That's something that is the case for a lot of people that go to camp and develop these amazing relationships there as well. So did you get into the kind of camp industry after college? Was it something that you had kind of worked for different sponsors and things like that before joining Intrax?
Yes, for sure, because so my path was a little indirect, and I won't take the time during this podcast, maybe another time, to tell you about some of my pre-cultural exchange career, short periods of time, but I tried a few different things after university, and when I finished university, and I also went to graduate school, and when I finished, and I had jobs during that period, and some of them indirectly touched on cultural exchange. I just basically was placing one summer just to help out Japanese students in short-term programs in the U.S. to do summer programs of English language and a little bit of adventure and activity. So I kind of had a little taste of the fact that this was even a career option. But then I went to do some more traditional things. And then in about late 80s, early 90s, I got my first position in another sponsor. And I basically, with that sponsor, I was there a very long time. I was there more than 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And I went through many positions. I was in the camp, and definitely in the camp positions, in the au pair, in the work travel, language school, all kinds of different products that are part of the cultural exchange wider field, and at all different levels. So I started quite junior level and progressed in my career there for 15 years, then made a difficult decision to change. A lot of that was because we were living in a different country, and it was time for us to come back to the U.S. because of our family. So when we came back, I did something slightly different for a few years, where I worked more on the side of sending Americans to programs outside of the U.S., all kinds of volunteer and travel programs, I know, similar to what InTraveler has now. And then in 2014, I was really fortunate that the chair and founder of Intrax at that point was looking to fill a position for the president at Intrax, and reached out to me. I flew to San Francisco from Arizona, where I was living at the time. We agreed that it would be a great fit, and 3 weeks later, there I was, moved and starting my role at Intrax, and I've been there now, 2024 will already be 10 years.
Wow.
So quite a long career in international education and exchange.
Amazing. It's an incredible journey as well. I think you've really done the most with all the different areas within cultural exchange, and obviously through different sponsors, and you've really sort of found your passion through that, even if it is sort of accidentally. I think it's a wonderful industry to be in, and I think there's a lot to kind of be grateful for with these opportunities that we're able to kind of offer different individuals sort of across the world. And I think Intrax has done a wonderful job with that, being such a kind of huge and inclusive company that's able to kind of offer a lot of different programs. We spoke to Dennis briefly about some of the programs that Intrax offers, whether that be sort of high school exchange and work travel and things like that. Have you got anything in the kind of works for kind of expanding and sort of the new things that Intrax are doing across cultural exchange?
Yes, I mean, we now, in 2014, when I started at Intrax, we had 4 J1 cultural exchange programs designations, and we now have 8.
Wow.
So we've expanded quite a lot, and I don't think we will want to take the time in the podcast today to go through all 8 of those programs. But our newest program within the last year or so is the teacher program, which we're bringing teachers into the U.S. on a cultural exchange experience and teaching experience, and these are experienced and trained teachers, and they're across the U.S. teaching in kindergarten through 12th grade education, all kinds of subjects. So that's a really great program. We're always looking at what else we can be doing and how else we can be expanding. we've got to the point now where we are covered in the majority of the J1 program options that even exist.
Wow.
So, that becomes interesting too when you think about growth.
Yeah.
But all of the programs are great. They all, they just, I just remember at some point, maybe middle career, where I would just think to myself, I even can't believe this is a job, because, it's hard work, obviously, and you have to be, it's quite business-like and professional and everything else. And there's a lot of processes and rules that you follow to be compliant and run excellent programs. But you also are meeting people continually from all ages, from all over the world, excited about life and new adventures. And then yourself traveling and having friends around the world, and that are more than, it's more than a tourist experience when you get to go somewhere, right? You see things really in the eyes of that culture. So it's just something that never would have dreamt I could be that passionate about. And, it's something where you don't mind. I mean, obviously sometimes it's hard when in the middle of the night there's something you have to deal with.
Yeah.
But because you're helping people and you're responding to situations where generally you have a positive outcome, it's just fantastic.
I can agree more. It reminds me a lot of being a camp counselor, when if there's something that happens in the middle of the night, if there's something going on with a camper, if someone's homesick, you've just got to deal with it. And again, I think it really, as you said, perfectly kind of sets you up for the rest of your life, that experience for sure. I just wish a lot more people knew about cultural exchange opportunities from a younger age, myself included. I started my journey on the kind of J1 Bridge USA program when I was 21. If I knew about it when I was 18, I absolutely would have done programs so much earlier. I think I would have definitely been interested in doing au pair care and that sort of side of things as well. I just think that there's so many different opportunities to offer depending on your personality and sort of where you want to go and how long you want to travel for. So if anyone listening is thinking about doing anything sort of beyond your camp counselor role, there are hundreds of different opportunities to do that, and absolutely grasp them whilst you can.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. And I tell that, to my own children, my own, grandchildren actually at this point. That's what's so great about a sponsor like Intrax, is that we have programs and opportunities from starting at age about 14 going up to really any age is the upper limit on some of our programs. And because we are in the camp counselor space, we obviously have great relationships with a lot of camps in the U.S. And so if people are thinking even of sending their children to summer camp, I'm sure that that's something that we could give some advice on.
Absolutely.
So I absolutely encourage it. There's nothing better, really. And, it's hard to imagine until you've actually experienced it.
Absolutely. Did your children, when they were younger, go to camp, and your kind of grandchildren, are they in that space at the moment where they're kind of experiencing camp? Amazing.
Yes, all, I don't have that many, just 2 children, but they both went to summer camp, and
Amazing.
They weren't quite like me in terms of sticking with the same camp. They did different kinds of camps.
Right.
But they always, every summer, they were at some summer camp experience. And also my sister, and my sister also was a camp counselor. Most of the grandchildren aren't old enough yet, because you don't send kids at 5 anymore. But my one granddaughter just had her first sleepaway camp experience this past summer for 3 weeks, and came back, and she was crying for 3 days that it was the best time she had in her life, and she just wants to go back. And so my daughter actually said, you need to speak to your grandma. And I spoke to her for a while and kind of shared some stories and told her I felt the same way and just wanted to shut myself in my room when I would come home from camp. And, of course she got over it, but she can't wait for next summer.
Oh, I love that. That's so amazing. And clearly camp runs in the family, and I think that's so wonderful that it's sort of carried on. And I think as kind of time has went on, even camps themselves are evolving. I think it was a lot of kind of traditional camps, but now again there's so many day camps that you can go to. There's so many different camp types for sort of those that are potentially like less affluent, to give them the opportunity to still be there, as well as kind of special needs. And there's a whole sort of plethora of different options for both campers and counsellors, which I think is just going to continue to grow. And I really love that. So that's amazing. That's so nice to hear.
Yeah, and that's on that point, I really think it's important for people thinking about being a counselor and going to summer camp to realize that you don't have to be, a star athlete. I mean, it's great if you have a skill that you really have developed and you shine that and you want to share. I mean, we do have a special premium program at AmeriCamp where for certain very highly skilled people in many different areas. So it's not just a sport. It could be something like ceramics or drama or some other area like that. There are special positions for those, but then you don't have to be good at sports to be a great summer camp counselor. Like you've just said, there are special needs camps. There are camps that are more like scouting and, those kind of skills that you might have from something like a Duke of Edinburgh's award level that you've taken or some other skills. So you should consider it for the experience, regardless of, your particular level of expertise at any one sport or another.
Yeah, absolutely. I think camp is the most inclusive environment, and there's always going to be something for someone depending on sort of what you want to get out of the experience. So I think that that's a huge takeaway for anyone that's considering applying and thinks that they need to be this extraordinary boat driving, martial arts, tennis playing superstar. That's not the case, and camp is absolutely for everyone. And that's something that I really loved, and I really love sort of sharing that with people that haven't experienced camp before as well. So for those that are unfamiliar, you are on the board for the Alliance of International Exchange, which is incredible, advocating for the J1 Bridge USA program. Are you able to talk to us a little bit more about the kind of pillars and sort of the work that is done through the Alliance? I think our kind of listeners would be really interested to hear more about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a really important organization, and I'm very proud and also have really enjoyed the years. I'm not quite sure yet at this point. We follow rules of how long people can be on the board and then sometimes cycle off and go back on. I've been on there quite a while now in some different roles, and right now I'm vice chair of that board and have been for the last few years. It's a Washington, D.C. based organization. We are a nonprofit, and we have about 90 or so members, and our members are all either sponsors like Intrax and or bodies like NAFSA, which is involved with the university student programs in the United States. And our main objectives are advocacy, which involves both the U.S. Department of State and everything related to consular affairs and J1 Bridge USA programs, but also Congress, where we spend quite a lot of time on a bipartisan level approaching senators and congressmen and women and their staff about the value of cultural exchange and
Amazing.
How it really it helps advance the public diplomacy goals of the United States. And I mean, those are our two main activities, is basically best practices within the sponsor communities, which make sure to keep a highly elevated level of protecting health, safety, and welfare of participants who come into the U.S., as well as educational in terms of newer sponsors that enter and mentoring them and helping them to understand how important that is, as well as the advocacy front, and which has had through the years varying challenges. And the great news, though, is that despite political party The support is widespread for these kinds of programs, and the Alliance plays a really important role in ensuring that that continues.
I feel like I'm learning a lot, because a lot of that I wasn't aware of, and I think you truly are the best person to be associated with AmeriCamp and the camp world, because you've sort of lived a lot of different lives with having so much experience with the Alliance and across different industries. So I think that's a really interesting kind of component to your job, and I think that's fantastic. So when we spoke with Dennis, he had mentioned that sort of around 90% of Intrax's international staff are women, and a lot of them are in leadership positions, which I think is phenomenal. A lot of kind of larger companies don't follow the same path of kind of inclusivity, and I just think that's definitely something to be celebrated. As obviously the president of Intrax, have you got any advice for kind of young women in business, or kind of young women stepping into kind of camp counselor roles and things like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's definitely one that I've thought about quite a lot, through the years, in many different contexts. It is true that the majority, not just at Intrax, but in the field overall, the majority of staff, it's not as high as 90% overall, but the majority of staff in international education and exchange seems to be much more female dominated than male, and it's unclear the exact reasons for that, because these are very dynamic fields that have lots of opportunity involved. So I would definitely encourage men to also apply for these positions. But I think my single most thing I would say as advice for young women who are young staff in this field, who would like to see their careers grow and develop, is actually, first of all, to just step up, volunteer, when new projects or new programs start up within the organization that you're in. Don't be afraid to just give it a try. And it doesn't always have to mean that that's going to be a direct promotion at that moment in time. Because for me, a lot of times I volunteered to do things, and it wasn't a new job within the company. It wasn't a promotion. I didn't get a salary increase, but I learned from it a lot. And then the people that were above me remembered over time that I was the person who always was saying, sure, I'll try that. And I would learn it. And it really helped me personally get a really vast amount of experience in a lot of different areas, so that I could look at things on a more macro level. But when actual promotion opportunities came up, it also made it maybe a little bit easier for me to be recognized as somebody who they knew. And I definitely wanted my career to advance. I also want to say that for people who, and there's no right or wrong here, because it's fine to not aspire to be the leader of an organization, because that does require sometimes certain sacrifices and, hours that most people often don't want to spend at work. That's fine too. I mean, I think that then just be the best you can be in the position you're in. Offer to help your colleagues and friends, and they'll do the same for you, and you'll have a great career, right? Try new things, because you may be working for a little while in something like camp counselor, and then a little while in something like au pair or teacher or work travel or all the other options there are. So really, there's so much opportunity out there that, I encourage people to think about that when they think about their choice of career, but also once they're in the company, to think about their possibility for career growth.
Absolutely. I think that's a great piece of advice and a great takeaway. I think especially for even personal growth as well as professional growth, I think, again, just kind of putting yourself out there, throwing yourself in the deep end and just trying different things on to see sort of what suits. You might have a strength that you've not sort of discovered yet, and a passion. If I'd never went to camp initially sort of 6 years ago, I never would have started my sort of adult career within AmeriCamp, and that's something that I'm incredibly grateful for. So you sort of never know what's around the corner unless you sort of jump straight in. So I completely echo everything that you've said. I think that's great for everyone to hear.
I think you're absolutely right. And there's a couple things I just would add that, the great thing about coming on a program like AmeriCamp is that if you're a little nervous, and, a lot of people can't just go out on their own and jump into things because they're afraid of their, what might happen and their safety and their security. And that's what's so great about programs like this is you're within a network that takes care of you.
Absolutely.
But it still gives you the opportunity to shine on your own, right? Without having to do everything on your own. So I think that's important. The other thing I would point out is I personally never thought about, as I was, changing jobs and having promotions, I never really thought of it as a male-female issue. I just thought of it as whoever's going to do a better job in a position is going to be the person that's going to do best at that position. And I would think that some of this may be a little bit unique to our industry overall, and I don't have data on that. I'd love to someday maybe look into that a little more, but I think we're just a very inclusive type of field, and the people that come into it are often very similar, so you don't encounter maybe quite as much some of that bias that you might in another kind of a field.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit? I know we've spoken obviously to Dennis previously about acquiring AmeriCamp, but it would be great just to get a little bit of sort of hearsay from your side with regards to Intrax's decision to acquire AmeriCamp and that kind of journey that started sort of 2021.
The two founders of Intrax, who sadly passed away in the last year, but founded the company more than 40 years ago, knew that the Camp Counselor program was a great program, but just through more circumstance had started other programs back to the 90s, maybe the early 2000s. They had started a lot of other programs and hadn't started a Camp Counselor program. And when I joined Intrax in 2014, and they asked me, to just, first of all, in my new role, review what Intrax had and what maybe Intrax should have. And when I said to them, it's really surprising to me that you don't have a Camp Counselor program at all, they said, well, we know it's a really great program, but we didn't apply early like so many others did. And so we feel that maybe we missed the boat on that and that it isn't really the time. And so for the first few years I was at Intrax, I kept coming back to, why don't we have a Camp Counselor program? We really need to have one. And they would just look at me and say, we already explained to you the reason.
Not this
right?
again.
It's like, okay, I'm not giving up on this because it's too good of a program.
Yeah.
So in about maybe 2017, 18, they finally said, okay, go ahead and apply. And so we went through quite a lengthy process of applying to be a new sponsor for the Camp Counselor program. I was a little worried that there were sponsors that had been around a very long time and were very well established, but I was going to keep trying. And so we did apply and we got our designation for a small program. We were very excited, but unfortunately, when we got the designation, it was just a few months before the pandemic.
Oh.
And so the timing couldn't have been worse in terms of launching a new program when nobody could go anywhere, right?
Yeah.
But during that time period when we were not entirely shut down, obviously we were working really hard, but some of our programs didn't have as many participants coming in, obviously during the pandemic.
Yeah.
We were doing a lot of thinking about our growth after the pandemic and what we were going to do. And I just kept saying, we need to find something really solid in the UK to help us recruit counselors from the UK that are in such high demand with summer camps. And we don't really have that. And by chance, I had a conversation with one of the founders of AmeriCamp. And we weren't talking about this topic at all. We were talking about something completely different. But as we were talking, at the end I said, really interesting. Might you be interested if Intrax had an interest in acquiring? And that started a number of conversations, which eventually involved Dennis and Lola and some other senior executives at Intrax, and eventually led us to acquire AmeriCamp, which we were very excited about. So I think, it might have been, time's gotten really weird since the pandemic, like which year, which thing happened. But I think, our first significant number of counselors from the UK came just this past summer.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to massive growth. We have a great team in the UK that's working on the recruitment, a great team in the US that's working on the summer camp development, and we have many camps looking for counselors of all different levels from the UK. We have our premium program where those unique superstars who are looking for a camp experience, and the camps are definitely looking for you. We can help with that, and you'll know that you're coming to a really solid place. So I'm very excited that the acquisition actually worked, and we're seeing really large numbers coming from the UK. But it took a while, really took a while to convince the founders that it was the right thing to do. And I kept coming back to my own camp experience that honestly, I wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't started that way.
I think it truly was a match made in heaven. I think it was an amazing decision, and I'm super thankful that it happened, because I think we've been able to create so many brand new opportunities with the help of Intrax. Obviously, with the acquisition, it now allows AmeriCamp to be not only a recruiter but a visa sponsor. So it means that we have more kind of decisions on sort of our participants and kind of broadening the opportunities for those in the UK. So that's something that I'm definitely incredibly passionate about. So I think I'm thrilled that and I think the growth is just going to continue for years to come. So I think it's been fantastic. So obviously you've done your fair share of different cultural exchange programs, and as we've spoken about being a camper and a counsellor, what is your advice for anyone applying to be a camp counsellor with AmeriCamp for summer 2024? And what should they be prepared for camp in general?
Oh my goodness. First of all, apply. It's the best thing you can do. And then you leave a lot of it in our hands in terms of making sure you end up in a good place. But I would encourage you to go to a camp fair. We have camp directors coming over in November, in January. Those are great opportunities to interview directly with the staff of the summer camp and figure out where you have the best match, and and knowing what positions they have opened. The team will take really good care of you. You'll have really fun at the event. You most likely will leave with a job. And then all the rest will take care of itself in terms of, camp and getting there and making sure to have the best summer of your life. What to prepare for and expect. There's all different kinds of camps, like we've already discussed. Some camps are going to be one kind of cabin, which is more like a log cabin that is quite fancy in a lot of cases, even though you are sharing with a lot of kids, which is, on another podcast, I can tell some of my adventures with my kids in my cabin and all the crazy things that, fun games and learning how to play jacks and all these other things.
We would love to hear about that. I think we definitely need an episode.
Sealing wax and all kinds of things. But some are more rugged kinds of experiences, different kinds of kids, but you're going to meet so many people and have so much fun, play games you never knew existed. If you're not so extroverted, then there's all kinds of ways that you can express yourself. There's music, there's campfires, there's ceramics and arts and all kinds of things. If you're fortunate, on your days off, you'll get to do really fun things and see places that are nearby your camp, swim in lakes, climb mountains, anything that you can dream of. So I would encourage you to apply, and come, and we can't wait to meet you.
I think one key skill I took away from camp was pickleball. That's never something that I did before going to the US. So that was something new that I learned. So if anyone is going to camp this year, that's something to look forward to if your camp does pickleball. And obviously with the J1 program, with our camp counselors, they get to travel after. So do you have any recommendations of places in the US that are a kind of must visit?
Yeah, I think I know a lot of the participants that will come, it won't be their first time in the U.S., but I know for those that it is the first time, sometimes it's hard to grasp how big the United States is.
Yeah.
And, you think, oh, I'm just going to pop over to the Grand Canyon and then I'm going to pop down here. And obviously things take a little bit of time, but you do have 30 days, which you can cover quite a lot of distance in 30 days. And, one of the things that we found that happens, and it happens frequently, is that even if you come to camp not knowing anyone, that's your friend that you're going with, and when you meet your friends that you will meet for sure at your camp, people come up with travel plans together, and so you're not traveling alone. And depending where you are geographically, and the majority of summer camps in the U.S., not all by far, but the majority are in the northeast of the United States. So you're going to be somewhere most likely where you will for sure want to see New York, and you will see New York. You're fortunate enough to see Boston. But then, it's up to you whether you're more interested in something like Disney or you're more interested in the national parks in the United States, which I think there's nowhere on earth that has national parks anything like what we have here.
I agree. They're incredible. That's breathtaking. That was one of the huge takeaways that I had from when I went to camp. Yellowstone is just completely just magical. I would second that on a must visit for there for sure. And then San Francisco as well. That's where you are at the moment, and I loved it when I went. So that would be my advice would be San Francisco as well. Definitely a must see.
Yeah, and we're always happy to say hello. If you come to San Francisco, you should make sure to knock on our door. We every now and then have some people that actually come and knock on our door at our office. I mean, they buzz from downstairs, and it's always great to see participants. San Francisco is a great city, and lots of things to do around the city and right outside the city. And you can see my Golden Gate Bridge, I think, and maybe not in this picture, no. But walk across the Golden Gate Bridge and go for a hike. It's absolutely beautiful.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Marcie. I think I've definitely learned a lot, and it's been wonderful to speak with you. I think there's definitely more episodes on the horizon. I want to hear your crazy camp stories, and I think a lot of other people do too. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and it's been great to chat with you.
Same here. Thank you. It was really enjoyable, and keep recruiting as well as you are, because we're looking forward to all those participants this summer.
Amazing.
And have a really great day, everybody.
Amazing. Bye.
Okay, bye.